Senator Whitehouse raised, this so-called deliberative process privilege. First, this committee and Congress have never accepted that kind of assertion as a basis to evade questioning in this kind of confirmation hearing. But I'd like to point out also that this witness has no right to invoke that privilege. It's a privilege for the government of the United States to invoke. Now, I notice that the Deputy Attorney General is sitting right behind the witness. I didn't hear the Deputy Attorney General invoke this privilege on behalf of the government of the United States. And I might point out also that the witness is invoking it selectively. When he wants to answer the question, no privilege. When he wants to avoid answering the question, he says he's not at liberty to answer it. We've never accepted that kind of tactic on the part of a witness. Yes, nominees have sometimes said they can't comment on a case or an issue because it may come before them as a judge. But this kind of selective invoking of a privilege smacks of evasion and defiance, and I think reflects on us as a committee if we accept it in this context, Mr. Chairman. So I hope that the witness may be instructed to answer these questions, or we can have a resolution somehow on the legitimacy of this kind of privilege and ask the witness to come back.
Welcome back to America First, where we cut through the Washington swamp and tell you the truth the mainstream media won't. I'm your host, and if you appreciate honest conservative commentary that put America first, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of patriots who refuse to be silenced by the establishment. Today, we're breaking down this absolutely explosive Senate confirmation hearing that perfectly illustrates everything wrong with the deep state and the weaponization of our justice system. What you're about to see is a textbook example of how career bureaucrats think they're above the law and above accountability to the American people.
Let me begin my questioning.
Mr. Chairman, I think the clock was started on Senator Blumenthal while he made his point of order. It might be a courtesy to allow it to be. Thank you. There it is.
I hadn't noticed that, Mr. Chairman, but I thank Senator Whitehouse for pointing it out. Thank you.
Let me say in the future,
Mr. Bove,
White House made very clear the issues you're bringing up, and I said I'm willing to discuss them. But
Thank you.
We can't take the time of this committee to hear a repeat of everything from every member that would disagree with what I said in my opening statement.
I appreciate
Senator
your
Bowman.
point, Mr. Chairman. I'll begin my questioning. Mr. Bove, you responded to Senator Kennedy's questions about who was consulted about the dismissal of charges against Mr. Adams. Did you ever talk to Stephen Miller before you filed the memorandum on February 10th ordering the dismissal of the Adams charges?
Senator, I responded to Senator Kennedy's questions based on a publicly filed document that described the Attorney General as a...
Did you talk to Stephen Miller?
I'm not going to describe the participants in conversations.
So you won't answer that question?
No, I will not, Senator.
Why?
Because it is not appropriate for me to discuss...
It is appropriate for you to tell us whom you consulted before taking action on behalf of the United States of America. You have no basis to avoid that question, Mr. Bove.
Respectfully, Senator, I'm answering that question in a manner similar to several nominees before me, including Judge Katz's.
Did you talk to anyone in the White House, including the President, about dismissal of the Adams charges before the February 10th memorandum?
I respectfully refer you back to my answer, Senator.
I am absolutely flabbergasted that you would come before this committee and refuse to tell us basic facts about a case that is at the core of the challenges to the appearance of impropriety that should disqualify you. You have the opportunity to clear the air, to come clean with the American people as well as this committee, and you are evading and avoiding these questions.
Senator, if you have a question about the position that I took in public with respect to the Mayor Adams case, I'm happy to address it, and I've addressed several today.
Well, I have asked you a question that bears on the appearance of impropriety. Let me go on. Mr. Bobe, in court, you represented, first, that there was no quid pro quo, but you said that the decision, even if there were a quid pro quo, was unreviewable. Unreviewable by the court. Do you stand by that?
I don't think that's what I said, Senator, because it's not consistent with the rule, which explicitly provides...
Well, you said it not only once, but you said it a number of times, and the judge observed, Judge Ho said, that your position was, quote, fundamentally incompatible with the basic promise of equal justice under law. That's what he said about your position, that the decision to dismiss these charges was unreviewable. Do you stand by that assertion?
I never made that assertion, and the judge granted the motion, Senator.
He granted the motion, but he disagreed with your premise that it was unreviewable. Let me ask you, are decisions to dismiss cases, as with that one, unreviewable?
The text of Rule 48 requires, in the instances presented by the Adams case, that dismissal only be provided for with leave of the court. That's as near a quote as I can give you, and the entire brief that I submitted acknowledged that point because we were seeking the leave.
Mr. Bobe, I am concerned about the quid pro quo that the judge concluded had been done. In fact, he said everything here smacks of a bargain. Everything here smacks of a bargain. But the quid pro quo that really concerns me is the one that brings you here today. You were virtually the only attorney in the Department of Justice willing to go to court and make a claim that career prosecutors said violated their basic standard of ethics. And the quid pro quo was a nomination to the Court of Appeals. That's the appearance that the American people can take away from your sitting before us with that nomination. And I think it does grave damage to respect for the rule of law, notwithstanding your assertions about your adherence to it, for you to be here as a result of that stand by you. Let me ask you about a separate issue, the firing of prosecutors and investigators who were involved in the January 6th prosecutions. You were involved in purging prosecutors who, in good faith and an exercise of their prosecutorial judgment, they went to court, they brought charges, you purged them. Isn't that correct?
I don't agree with the use of the word purged, Senator.
Well, you fired them.
I authorized the termination of probationary employees at that U.S. Attorney's Office, yes.
Because they prosecuted the January 6th rioters.
No, because I was concerned about efforts in the prior administration to embed those prosecutors as permanent employees at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And you also fired the FBI investigators involved in the January 6th prosecution, correct?
No, that's not accurate.
You worked with Director Patel in firing them, correct?
No, that's not accurate.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pivot away from the Democrats' fake outrage.
Let's start with the elephant in the room. This nominee, who's seeking confirmation to a federal appeals court, is playing word games with our elected senators. When asked basic questions about who he consulted before dismissing charges in a major corruption case, he hides behind something called deliberative process privilege. Here's the problem with that. This privilege belongs to the executive branch, not to individual nominees trying to dodge accountability. The senator calling him out is absolutely right. You cannot selectively invoke privilege. You can't answer the questions you like and then claim privilege on the ones that might expose your political motivations. That's not how our system works. And it's exactly the kind of bureaucratic arrogance that President Trump fought against during his first term. Now, let's talk about this Adams case, because this is where things get really interesting. This nominee went to court and argued that certain prosecutorial decisions are completely unreviewable by federal judges. Think about what that means for a second. He's essentially arguing that prosecutors can do whatever they want, and no court can check their power. Even the federal judge in the case, Judge Ho, called this position fundamentally incompatible with the basic promise of equal justice under law. This is a weaponization of justice in action, folks. When prosecutors believe they're above judicial review, when they think they can make decisions based on political considerations rather than the law, that's when our entire system breaks down. This nominee was willing to make arguments that even career prosecutors said violated basic ethical standards. Why? Because it served the political interests of his superiors. The most damning part of this hearing is the suggestion that this nomination itself might be a reward for the nominee's willingness to make these ethically questionable arguments. The senator points out that this nominee was virtually the only attorney in the Department of Justice willing to go to court and make these claims. And now he's being rewarded with a lifetime appointment to the Federal Appeals Court. That's not justice. That's politics. Let's also address the January 6th issue that comes up at the end of this transcript. The nominee admits to authorizing the termination of probationary prosecutors who were involved in January 6 cases. His excuse? He was concerned about efforts to embed these prosecutors as permanent employees. But here's what's really happening. The current administration is purging anyone who might stand in the way of their political agenda. This is exactly why we need fighters like President Trump back in office. The deep state thinks it can operate without accountability, that it can weaponize the justice system against political opponents while protecting its allies. This confirmation hearing proves that the swamp is alive and well, and it's working overtime to protect itself. The senator asking these questions deserves credit for holding this nominee accountable. Too often, these confirmation hearings are just kabuki theater, where nominees give non-answers and senators let them get away with it. But when you refuse to answer basic questions about your decision-making process, when you hide behind privileges that don't apply to you, that tells us everything we need to know about your character. Here's what every American needs to understand. This isn't just about one nomination. This is about whether we're going to have a justice system that serves the American people or one that serves the political establishment. When prosecutors can dismiss cases based on political considerations and then claim those decisions are unreviewable, when career bureaucrats can purge investigators who don't toe the party line, that's not justice. That's authoritarianism. The fact that this nominee thinks he can stonewall a Senate confirmation hearing shows you how arrogant these deep state operatives have become. They think they're untouchable. They think they can do whatever they want without consequences. That's exactly the attitude that President Trump fought against, and it's why the establishment hated him so much. This hearing is a perfect example of why we need term limits for federal judges, why we need to reform the Department of Justice, and why we need leaders who will drain the swamp instead of feeding it. The American people deserve prosecutors who follow the law, not political operatives masquerading as public servants. If this nominee gets confirmed, it will send a clear message that the establishment rewards loyalty over integrity, that political considerations matter more than the rule of law. That's not the America our founders envisioned, and it's not the America we're going to accept. We need to keep fighting patriots. We need to keep exposing the corruption, keep holding these bureaucrats accountable, and keep demanding better from our government. The swamp doesn't want to be drained, but we're going to drain it anyway. Thanks for watching America First. If you want to stay informed about the deep state's latest schemes and the fight to restore accountability to our government, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Share this video with fellow patriots who need to understand what's really happening in Washington. Together, we're going to take our country back and put America first once again.